And by the way, it's very important to understand that this is, I really, one of the things that's becoming very, very clear to me is that one of the myths that has to get killed is the idea that there's anybody that can't wake up. That's got to get killed. If we make reference to the ancient sacred teachings and so forth, the wisdom teachings, they come from a time when it was a different world. They didn't have the internet. A lot of people never went to school. The only opportunity that you had to hear the truth is if you had the good fortune of coming across it in your life, and most people didn't have the good fortune of coming across it. Yeah. And so there were people who back then said things like, very, 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 very few human beings will wake up. Because very few human beings did wake up. But that was because of the situation at that particular time. So now it's very important to understand that that wasn't true then and it's not true now. If you can hear me, you can wake up. Yeah, and that's your birthright. That seed is in you now. Well, see, it was so the thing that's different when you wake up, right, is that awareness has shown up in your life. And prior to that ontological shift, that conversion, as Richard Rohr calls it, that conversion from being a human being, the conversion from being human and when the conversion takes place, instead of being a human being, so in other words, your identity is your body and your personality. That's human, right? Instead of being that, now you're being human. So the humanness that was you, okay, is now being experienced by the awareness. Where prior to having that ontological shift, the identity that you had was your body and your personality, and you were living your life as that, doing the best you could as that, not succeeding too much as that, suffering as that, trying hard as that, struggling as that, coping as that, all the things that people do, trying to figure a way out of this, trying to make enough money to get out of this as if that's going to work, right? Yeah, so that's all you got. That's all you got. When you're born, once you eat the fruit, which is about 18 months old, once you eat the fruit is language. The fruit is, that which gives you the opportunity to identify yourself as something other than what you actually are. That's eating the fruit. That's language. When somebody said, oh, you're your name now, you're not your awareness, you're your name. And you're your body, not your awareness, you're your body. And I can prove to you that that's true. Look around, there's 8 billion of us. Now, they don't finish that sentence. If they were going to finish that sentence, obviously, they'd say, look around, there are 8 billion of us. We may all be suffering and killing each other off and destroying the planet, but that's who we are. We're working on it. We're trying to get out of this. And the harder we try, interestingly enough, the harder humanity tries to get out of the mess that they've created, the worse the mess gets. Why would that be happening? Maybe it's because there's a divine design involved. And maybe the divine design that's involved is the harder you try to have your life work as something you're not, the harder it will get to try and wake you up, to try and nudge you hard enough to say, come on, stop being something that's not real. Stop trying to experience happiness as something that can experience happiness because it doesn't actually exist. So if the message that's sending is suffering, if the suffering is a message from the divine, to pay attention here, start looking at what's going on here and seeing it clearly so you can stop being stupid. If that's a message from the divine, right, then the question is, what will it take? And there's no, instead of answering this in terms of the collective question, what will it take for you? If it's true that happiness is a real possibility for you, no matter who you are or what you've done. You know, I worked in prisons for 32 years and I tested it out. You know, I worked with serial killers, you know, I worked with psychopaths, people who in conventional psychology are not supposed to be able to change, right? And I'm a psychologist, so I was trained in that lie. Okay? But the problem is when I work with those people and I introduced the truth to them and gave them an opportunity to practice experiencing it, they woke up just like anybody else. Woke up just like anybody else. And when they woke up, they had an ontological experience of being awareness. They had an ontological experience of being awareness. And it didn't matter whether they could talk about it clearly. That didn't matter. Okay? Who they were being was clearly different. I had inmates' family call me and ask me, what the hell happened? Because my son called me and spoke to me in a way that I never heard him speak before. Really interested in having me understand that he loves me. These people it blew their mind, right? So that to me is about as much proof as you can possibly want. You know, if that can happen for them, it can obviously happen for you. So don't ever think that you're not a candidate for being awake. And more than that, right, not only is that the case, but more than that, you are actually awake right now. You know, I want to take away from you the idea that you're somewhere else. I want to take away from you the idea that you have to go through a process in order to experience being awake. That's not true. That's not, the personality believes that, because the personality is a time-oriented identity, isn't it? Yeah, the personality depends on what happens in the past and the future in order to cause what happens now, right? So the personality, when the personality entertains the possibility of experiencing being awake, the first thing it does is say, well, I'm not now. And if I'm not awake now, obviously I have to do something, or something has to happen. You know, somebody has to strike me awake or something. I don't know, but I'm not awake now. So the personality immediately starts to look at it in time. Right? But the real deal is this: you are awake right now. That's how you're hearing me. You are awake right now. That's how you're seeing, right? That's how you're experiencing your senses, right? The thing is this, though. Who you take yourself to be doesn't know that, right? Who you take yourself to be doesn't know that, right? And so if I talk to you about the process, who you take yourself to be will tell me about your struggle, or about your confusion, or about your desperation, or about, you know, all this stuff that goes on mentally for you that you believe is a barrier to your being awake, when in fact that's simply not the case. And so the bottom line is meditation will do nothing for you in terms of your waking up and experiencing your true nature and being able to enjoy that in terms of the state of well-being that brings with it. Meditation will do nothing for you when it comes to that. Except that meditation, if you practice it diligently, patiently, and persistently over time, except that meditation, if you practice it that way, will gradually have you settle down and become physically relaxed enough, and gradually have you settle down and become mentally calm enough that once the system settles down and calms down enough and gets out of the way, your true nature will be there. Because it's there. You're aware right now, right? But you're not being the awareness, you're being the thinker, aren't you? Yeah, you're not being the awareness, you're being who they told you were, trying to make that work. That's what you're doing. You're being who they told you were, trying to make that work. You're being the person and the body and you're trying to make that work, and because being the person in the body has you take yourself to be a separate self, yeah? When you wake up to your true nature, you're experiencing no longer being a separate self. You and everybody else are the same. You and the world are the same, because you begin to realize that awareness or consciousness is everything. It is you and it is what you see at the same time. And so when you begin to wake up, you begin to see that that's the case. But it won't, as I was saying to somebody earlier, this is very important to understand. I was listening to Richard Rohr and Ken Wilber talk about it last night, right? Yes, anybody can wake up, and it's not as hard as you think it is. All you have to do is be persistent and diligent and practice meditation, which will help you to relax the system, right? And help you to relax your nervous system, help you to relax the mental state. So once that's sufficiently relaxed, then what's there and what's been there all along becomes available for you to realize, becomes available for you to experience, becomes available for you to be as an identity. Once that happens, and you awaken to the reality of what you are, your natural state, right? The condition you were in is still the condition. So so your level of maturity doesn't change because you're awake. Right? This explains a lot if you look at some of the things that have happened with spiritual teachers, right? Where they didn't realize that because I was awake, that didn't mean it changed my conditioning. It didn't mean that all of a sudden I stopped having the potential to behave poorly. Didn't mean that. Right? So what a lot of the integrated Zen teachers say these days is there's 2 steps to this process, right? Well, I see there's actually 3, but there's at least 2 steps to this process. The first one is wake up. Okay, so that's what you're practicing meditation to do, to calm down enough to be awake. That's what the meditation is doing, helping you to calm down. So the first thing is to wake up. When you experience an ontological shift, when you experience that you're now seeing through different eyes, that you're seeing the world differently than you saw it before, and not only are you seeing it differently, but you're seeing it clearly. You're seeing it the way it is. You're seeing things as they are, When you start to realize you're seeing things as they are, it's very important for you at that point to begin to consistently pay attention to the mental activity because it's running an outdated program. It's running an operating system that's old. It's not an operating system that's consistent with being awake. It's an operating system that's consistent with being a personality and a separate self, right? And that's a dramatically different operating system because it will have you behave as if somebody's out to get you. And when you're awake, you realize that nobody's out to get you. There's no such thing as anybody being out to get you. That's a dream. That's a bad dream. But you're going to have to now practice, once you're awake, you're going to have to practice paying attention. So you've developed your ability to pay attention through meditation, right? And you're going to use that ability now to pay attention to what's going on in the mental realm, in your mental realm, because that's where an outdated program is running. Okay? And all you have to do the shadow work is to be aware when the program is running an outdated process that would have you say or do things or experience things in such a way that you're a separate self, and you have to be careful because there's a lot of threat that could come and get you and kill you and hurt you. All you have to do shadow work is to watch that play. And you're watching it play with a realization and a recognition and an awareness that it is not applicable. Therefore, you're not going to participate with it. You're not going to act consistent with it, right? And when you do that, it starts to naturally die a death. When you don't feed the dog, it dies. When you don't feed the mind, the material there just disappears. Because it appeared because of your involvement with it as an identity that was afraid. Does this make sense? Yeah. So that's what meditation is. You could say meditation is one of many processes, right? Because through the teachings of the wisdom teachings, meditation wasn't the only way, right? And I can't speak too much about other kinds of methods, but because this is the method that I'm familiar with, that I practice, but I can tell you that this works. I can tell you that this works. You can take psychedelics, I've tried that. You know, you can take psychedelics, and they will give you a visit to the possibility, a temporary visit to the possibility, a temporary witnessing of what it would be like if you were actually in the natural state. But then that comes to an end, and you come back to the ordinary way you are. So, is it useful? Maybe for some people, right? Will it get you there? Will it get you anywhere? No, won't get you there. All it's doing is temporarily modifying the operation of the mind so that it's not so much in the way and you can start to feel and see some things. But it's not an answer. You're always going to end up coming back to this ordinary state of consciousness, right? And so this is one of the things that I want to really emphasize with you today, is that when you're in this ordinary state of consciousness, you think one of the barriers to being awake is the thought or the idea that this ordinary state of consciousness isn't it. Isn't it? That's what the personality does. It says, oh, I hear what you're saying, it sounds great, but this isn't it. This isn't that, okay? Well, that's another mistake, right? Because isn't it interesting that no matter how many ways you alter your consciousness, you know, up or down, take downers or uppers, right? Or trippers, right? No matter what you do with your consciousness, it always comes back to this. Always comes back to this. Right? So what if this ordinary experience that you're having all the time is enlightenment? This ordinary. In Buddhism, they say nirvana, first of all, they say the unenlightened experience is called samsara, right? And then they say the enlightened experience is called nirvana, right? When you're no longer experiencing your identity as a separate self, right? But then what they say is, however, nirvana is samsara. The state that you thought was unenlightened is unenlightenment, right? This is a major barrier for a lot of people because they think, well, how do I know I'm experiencing the truth? Well, it won't be this. Oh, really? See, because it's not what's happening, it's who you're being with it. That's what's different. It's an ontological difference. It's not what's happening, it's who you're being with it. And when you're being what you are, the natural state, when you're being the awareness, when you're being the consciousness that is your real state, your actual nature, when you're being that, and the light of that awareness shines on what's not working, right? The workability of that starts to naturally start to reorganize in a way that's consistent with the truth. So if you wake up and you understand the need to pay attention to the outdated mental processing, and you do that over time, as you continue to do that, the mind will just gradually start to clear up and get quieter and quieter until it gets to the point where it's actually a mirror. Instead of it processing everything in relationship to your past experience, it just mirrors what's happening. So the mind becomes like a mirror. It's seeing things as they are. It's not changing them into what you think they are. It's not changing them into what you have to be afraid of and be careful about because you're a separate self. No. It begins to allow you to experience love and experience love as your true nature. And you could say that the experience of love is the experience of oneness or non-duality. It's the experience of the experiencing that everything is me and I am everything. And therefore, is there anything that I do not love? If I am everything, if non-duality is true, if the unified experience occurs for me, it means that I am no longer separate from anything, that I am love. I am an affinity with all that exists. And when I experience this and I relax, I experience a fulfillment. The possibility of the experience that I could have as a human being is fulfilled. Now I can be the baby and the adult at the same time. I have the innocence, the clarity, and the freedom of the baby, and I have the sophistication, maturity, and wisdom of the adult. And when you put the package together, it's the fulfillment of the possibility of a human life, and now I can die happy. Now I can relax and accept the end of this experience, this very temporary experience. I can relax and accept the end of this experience because I now know myself in such a way that there's no fear, there's nothing to fear. When the body ends and the personality goes with it, the experience I've been having of my true nature will be untouched. That's the promise. That's what Jesus Christ said, I offer you life everlasting. That's what he meant. He didn't mean I'm going to do a magic trick on you. No, he meant that's your nature. Your nature wasn't born and it's not going to die. So how could I can offer you that? I'm not offering you that because I'm going to make it happen. I'm offering you that because it's already true. And I'm just inviting you to begin to become aware of and experience it that way so you can have some fun before this is over.